I put together a compact individual first aid kit, or IFAK, that's perfect for gunshot wounds, car accidents, and other traumatic injuries. It's a MOLLE-compatible pouch in Coyote, ACU, or Black. It's equipped with an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, an Asherman chest seal, nasopharyngeal airway, a TK4 tourniquet, 3 pre-threaded nylon sutures, EMT shears, betadine swabs, steri strips, and lots of extras. It's perfect for your glove box, bug-out bag, or home first aid kit. Go to the PrepperRecon.com homepage and click on the IFAK store tab at the top of the page. $99 includes shipping, and this kit could save your life.
But there's one sound that no one knows. What does the fox say? What the fox say?
Today's guest is Fox 519. Fox does the Eye on the Economy section over at Radio Free Redoubt. Fox, thanks for coming back on the show.
Oh, it's always glad to be back on with you guys. Thanks again.
Oh, absolutely. We've had all our readers and listeners wanting to know, what's the Fox say?
Fox say, well, I'm not going to make any annoying noises, but I will say, sell what you've got in the market and get yourself into gold and silver right away. That's what I'm going to tell you right offhand.
Very cool. Now, I heard your Eye on the Economy piece a couple weeks ago about the Fed sending out a memo that they wouldn't be accepting unfit currency. Can you tell us the details about that report and tell us about your job and how you came to get that information?
Sure, absolutely. That way it goes to build some credibility for your listeners. For those of you who don't know, I actually am a banker by trade up in the Redoubt, and I work for an institution and I have for the last 3 years, but I've been in the industry for 14. Never seen anything like what I saw on March 4th that was delivered to us. I was actually part of an operations meeting for the particular financial institution that I work for. And what basically transpired was, as part of this operations meeting, we were given a direction on what if a customer were to present damaged or nasty currency. I think the situation arose where some currency was taken off of an individual who had defecated on it, basically is the best way to put it, and the detective presented it to the bank. What do we do with that? Well, in the research process of the individual who was delivering the meeting to us, she said, well, there is a new policy that the Fed will not actually accept any unfit currency. And unfit currency is now defined as anything limp, worn, torn, heavily creased, or wrinkled, not to mention soiled or covered with any sort of biological matter, mold, feces, urine, anything nasty like that. And so as we got to talking in the meeting and reading this memo, and I think the memo is actually posted over at Radio Free Redoubt. It's a redacted memo that obviously I was able to put up. But what happened is that what's happening is people are coming and presenting old bills. So let's say Grandma and Grandpa presents a bill to little Johnny for his birthday, and that bill just happens to be a really crumpled, wrinkled 20 that Grandpa had in a coffee can out in the shop. If he were to go to present that to the bank, the teller does have the option to say, I'm sorry, I cannot accept that bill. That bill is unfit. So instead of actually the teller taking that bill, exchanging it for a new one or depositing it, whatever, because normally the process is you would bring some bills into the bank. Those bills would be deposited. During the course, if those bills were discovered unfit, they'd be shipped to a central vault, usually Loomis, Fargo, Garda, any sort of armed courier service. The armed courier service would then ship to the Fed. The problem is the Fed is no longer accepting those. They are shipping them back to the central vaults. The central vault has to then return it back to the bank from whence it came, bank or credit union, and then the bank is up to take the loss on that. So banks are kind of ahead of time saying, well, here's the policy. We're going to go ahead and give the client the envelope, the instructions, and the letter that needs to go back. Well, I got curious on this after leaving that meeting, because to me it looks like when central banks stopped accepting their own currency, which means they're trying to remove IOUs off their balance sheet so they don't have to honor them anymore. What happened in this particular circumstance, so I started doing some research. So I called our operations person and just kind of played possum a little bit. Turns out I got to talk to a customer who had this happen to him over in the Redoubt, over in Idaho, and they had shipped currency back 3 times. And all 3 times the Fed had to return it back to him stating it wasn't packaged correctly. When I know the particular individual that helped with it, they packaged it correctly. So we know that already this is starting to happen. But it's just a maybe at this point. Banks can still pass that stuff along. I think as we get closer to where we see things going, the Fed is more and more and more is going to require people to use brand new currency or no currency at all.
Wow. So,
yeah.
You think this is the first sign of moving away from paper currency altogether? And do you think this move could be in the direction of a completely digital currency?
I 100% agree, because what we've just seen happen with Bitcoin over the last 2-3 months, where big Bitcoin exchanges all of a sudden just crumble overnight and disappear. If you're going to have competing digital currencies, you're only going to want one digital currency controlled by one entity. And so, yeah, I do think that what we're moving towards is this, possibly head in hand kind of a system where, they have a digital currency. You're paid with direct deposit. You're no longer allowed to cash your check at the bank. Your Social Security comes via direct deposit. Your entitlements are all direct deposit. Banks are pulling this cash out of circulation. We've been trying to pull checks off the market for years and years and years. Yeah, I do. I think we're going to a form of digital currency, because what's going to happen is the more the banks reject this stuff, big businesses like Target, Walmart, they're going to go, wait a minute here, we're not taking cash anymore. You've got to use your debit card here, or their special in-store card that you preload with digital currency. So people are there's going to be all this connectivity through the marketplace with digital currency, which, as we know, debit cards can be shut off at the drop of a hat. We saw this happen in Russia here a couple of weeks ago. The sanctions came down, Visa, MasterCard cut off the funding to the cards over there, and lo and behold, people were high and dry over there. So yeah, I think digital currency is really close. I think within maybe a year and a half, if not sooner.
And we saw 500 million in Bitcoins get erased or stolen in one night.
Yeah, that was Mt. Gox, and boy, that sent ripples through the Bitcoin community. I've never been a big fan of Bitcoin just because it's not backed by anything, gold or silver, but it's a fiat currency as well. But to have a digital currency just up and almost bankrupt overnight, come on. I mean, let's put two and two together here. We know that the Fed probably had a hand in it.
They've got a hand in everything else, and with the capabilities that the NSA has, and we know that they're all colluding together. We've got the politicians colluding with the IRS to harass Tea Party members, and the DOJ to harass and spy on Fox News, which is, for the most part, pretty much a corporate puppet, But
yeah.
If even Fox News is too much of a threat, and they've actually got to go in and intimidate them, I guess, to just make sure that they know their place. Which I think for the most part, they do know their place, and they do play ball for the most part.
Yeah, but, I think there's a reason that Rush calls them the drive-by media. You know what? They go in, they're told what to say, when to say it. I mean, if you don't fall in line in the media, boy, I tell you what, you are in the sights. I mean, they're looking at anybody and everybody who's an alternative media these days, and they don't like that.
I know Prepper Recon's been hacked multiple times.
Oh, and I've heard that Radio Free Redoubt's had its fair share of attacks as well. So,
and now, do you believe that all of this could be the precursor to the mark of the beast spoken of in Revelations? We know that it says that men won't be able to buy nor sell without the mark of the beast, and it sort of speaks to this global currency. And the only way that would have never been possible when that prophecy was written, that would have never really been possible. There was no pragmatic way to institute that. But now, with RFID chips and basically the credit card processing centers that we have now, it could happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I do. I think we could highly probably see that in our lifetimes. I think that a lot of things have got to come to pass before. I think we've got to see Gog and Magog go at it pretty heavily. We've got to see, what's basically, I think it's Matthew chapter 5 about, there's some really bad stuff that's going to go on the Golan Heights and some of that from a a biblical perspective. But yeah, I think we're moving that direction. I know that some of the folks I work with up here in the Redoubt, we've got one gal in particular who she is plagued by a dream that we have to create an underground, basically farmers market system for anybody to buy anything of it who believe in the faith that you and I believe in, and the listeners out there. Yeah, I think that what we're going to see is when they finally get everybody forced to a system of electronic payments, what they're then going to do is they're going to say, well, instead of having this little card, you got to have this special bracelet, or you got to have this special, I'm not going to say barcode because that's too cliche, but who knows, they might try it. Yeah, I think it's highly probable we could see that in our lifetimes. If not, after the financial collapse, they're going to have some central payment way. And I don't know if you've talked with Glenn Tate before. I think his idea of the F card in the 299 day series, I think there's something to that. They're going to try something along those lines.
Very cool. Now, is there any way that patriots would still be able to have private transactions outside of the system if we did away with the paper currency?
Yeah, I think the only way we're going to do to really get into a system like that is it's going to have to be barter. It's going to have to be based off of silver. I think last time you and I had a chance to chat, we did talk about, the readers the listeners getting into silver. And, small tradable silver is the way to go. I mean, it's got intrinsic value. It's been used for thousands of years in terms of currency, but also too, just having really good barter skills. I've got these 12 eggs, and you've got, a pound of chicken. Let's go ahead and trade. I think that we're going to have to learn to get back to a barter style economy, because if they control the toilet paper and they control that stuff, we've got to figure out a different way to do it. We've got to work around the system. And, you think about when the nation was first founded, we didn't have money. When the settlers came over on the Mayflower, they traded with each other. You have 3 ears of corn. You've got 4 carrots. I would like those, but we also have to think of, because there are going to be people who are mischievous. We don't live in that environment anymore. So you got to think of, okay, things like small bottles of liquor, cigarettes, dare I say condoms, those kind of things will be tradable commodities. That's like, you know what? I need a pack of Band-Aids and a tube of Neosporin, and you've got what I need, and I've got 2 packs of cigarettes here. I don't personally smoke, nor do I support it, but I do have some for my own trading supplies. And those kind of things, when they're gone, will be highly valuable.
Yeah, and there can be medicinal purposes for alcohol as well, but I worry about having those things for barter items, because I'm worried about the type of people that I'll bring into my circle by having those items for barter, because I'm afraid that I'm going to bring in the wrong type of person, that they've probably dealing with some addiction issues, especially cigarettes, or, there's very few people that smoke that aren't addicted to them. And I'm afraid that they're going to be expending all of their resources on cigarettes and alcohol and meeting their addiction demands. And when those resources dry up, they might realize that I have an abundance of resources, and that might make me a target to those people. So I'm always hesitant to that. But I really like the idea of having a smaller denomination junk silver, like pre-64 dimes and quarters, especially for smaller transactions. But now, what about this? A silver dime right now has about $1.50's worth of silver in it. But if it goes back to the levels of near $50 that it was a couple of years ago, that amount could change rapidly. What do you think about ammunition as a barter currency for transactions that might be even smaller than a silver dime?
I've always liked the idea of using 1022 as a barter currency. I think it 1022 isn't necessarily plentiful right now, but when you do get it and you're allowed to buy up as much as you can, it's great, because it's like 22 can be used for, you hit a deer in the right spot, you can drop it. There'll be a lot of guys out there that say no, but I've seen it happen personally. I saw somebody shoot a deer in the head and drop it with a 22. So you can use it for that. Kind of going back and addressing your point of the people you bring into your circle. One of the key things I think that I've, just in my research too, especially when you barter, is that you never want to barter at or near your retreat. you always want to try to barter well away from it. And that's because you don't ever want anybody to know, where your storage is or where your retreat is. I think that one of Rawls's books, I can't remember which one, maybe it was Patriots, one of the first ones, or the first one, talked about that, where they didn't barter anywhere near their compound. They actually left and went into Lewiston, or I think they went into Pullman, I think is where they were, and they bartered there. And everybody kind of came to a central point. So, I think that if you're thinking about, okay, where would a barter economy start? Yeah, junk silver would be great. 1022 would work well. But an area like a ball field or a small public arena, like a rodeo grounds or, maybe, small stadiums somewhere that would be good barter locations. And so you never have to worry about, because you'd be probably traveling with members of your group who are well armed. But at the same time, when you go there, you don't have to worry about, them knowing, you just walk 10 feet out your front door and say, I've got 3 packs of cigarettes, them thinking you have more. But I like the idea of junk silver. I've always loved the idea of it. I wish we could use it now, and I think that one of the key things is when the collapse comes, and maybe it's just me, but I'm one of these guys that I track the price of silver daily. So I know where it's at. So I will know when the collapse happens, the silver ends at 32.08 for an ounce. I'm going to have that documented on that day. So it's like, wait, but we know that's probably going to go up over the long run too. So silver is going to change in value, but it only gives you, when you're bartering, the key thing is letting that person know, this is what I got. This is what we got to work with. We're not going anywhere else. So, but yeah, ammo is a great way to do it. 1022 is probably your best, most tradable. 9mm, okay. 45 ACP. 223, maybe the Russian stuff, Tula, if you can get your hands on it these days. That seems to have dried up once our president levied some sanctions against Russia. But yeah, any one of those kind of common calibers would be work for you.
And then maybe another caveat we should give, if you're going to barter ammunition, it's probably a good idea to keep that inside your community, inside your mutual assistance group, or the other people that you're relying on mutually for security. Because if you get that outside of your group, it could actually be the ammunition that's used to attack your compound or your community.
Yeah, and that's a risk, and that's the hardest part about is we want to have some faith in humanity, but we know that there's going to be some really bad folks. We know that a collapse brings out the worst in people. I mean, take a look at Venezuela for a second. Number 4, number 5 gold or oil producer in the world, but people, they can't even get toilet paper, and people are robbing stores. People are using their kids because the government's telling them they can only go shopping once every 8 days. I mean, it's just a collapse brings out the worst in humanity. I mean, it's the sin nature of all of us gets pulled out. And yeah, that's a tough one. Maybe it's easier to defend against 1022. It still hurts.
Yeah.
But a bullet's
and if
a bullet.
it'll drop a deer, it'll drop a person if you're hitting the right spot.
You betcha. Hey, it was what was used on Kennedy. So, I mean, I would say, just be cautious with that, but at the same time, it's got some value, and anything like that's got value. I mean, heck, medical supplies. You and I were talking right before we started recording about, setting up field medic bags, that kind of stuff. Think about how simple a Band-Aid is. But if it's not there, you have an open wound ready for infection. But a simple Band-Aid, hey, listen, you know what? I need some milk. Here's 10 Band-Aids. That kind of, it's an interesting thought to have to trade off those kind of things. But believe it or not, people are going to be in high demand. Toilet paper is going to be, I know I keep getting back to that, but I'm hearing horror stories after horror stories coming out of Venezuela about people going, I don't even know what to wipe my backside with,
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, and so that's a big thing, is having a plentiful supply of that. Imagine what somebody would give if we get 3-4 months into a collapse and you look at them and go, I've got a roll of toilet paper.
Yeah.
They're going to look at you and kind of go, okay, whatever you want, I'll give it to you.
And maybe another good barter location would be just vacant parking lots of Walmarts, because it's big and it's open and you could almost like trade out of the trunk of your car if there's still gasoline, or just
even Granges
out of your backpack.
I don't know if you guys if Granges down there where y'all are located at, but Granges are a great location for central information distribution. I know the Oath Keepers, they are going to rely heavily on the Granges when it comes down for their civilian preservation teams. Granges are a really neat idea, and they were something that, when the West was being won, the idea of the Grange was you could come there, you could do your trades, you could get information, you kind of all-in-one location. And I don't think we really realize that how neat those Granges are and why we still have them this day. I mean, there's Grange preservation societies all over America, and they could be an incredible location to be able to do all that kind of thing at.
Yeah, and antibiotics, that's a good barter item too. And I had Glenn on. Glenn Tate was on last week, and we actually were discussing Thomas Labs, which was they're the producer of the fish mox and the fish flocks, the ciprofloxacin and the amoxicillin for fish. That
oh yeah,
a lot of preppers buy that stuff. And last week they actually closed down. And Glenn Tate and I were speculating that maybe it was the FDA shut them down, or we didn't know because their website went dark. I got an email from them because I purchased large quantities from them, saying that they were out of business indefinitely, and then but they are back opening. They are back open. The last time I checked, their website was still down, but they are accepting orders and they're answering their phones now. So just to let everybody know that listens to the show regularly, that scare's over. So they're still good. So, but you know what? Hey, maybe it's one of those things like the ammunition scare. It's a good reminder of those types of things we take for granted, that we're always going to be able to order it tomorrow, and then someday you're not going to be able to. And so stock up on it, because antibiotics will actually go about at their full potential for at least 7 years if you keep it in a good climate, not too hot, not too cold, cool, dark area. They'll actually go about 7 years beyond their expiration date, and even after that, they don't go toxic. They just start to lose some of their potency, and you would just have to double up on them if you were going to use them more than 7 years past their expiration date.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And I'd heard about those guys that they had been shut down. I wouldn't surprise me if the FDA was driving that, just because obviously, and to me it's like, you know what? I had a cold a while back. I didn't want to go see the doctor. I took some fish mox. You know what? I got over it and I'm fine.
Can you breathe underwater?
Surprisingly, yes. It's amazing.
I got gills.
Yeah, I got gills. It's great. My wife thinks they're a little creepy, but nevertheless. But no, you know what? I don't know why. And maybe it's because it's a multi-trillion-dollar business per year. But again, stay out of our business. If we want to buy fish mox and feed it to our kids and feed it to ourselves and make ourselves better, hopefully we're not as reliant on antibiotics, to deal with bugs. But
yeah.
You got a nasty one that comes along, get a nasty cut. If you get somebody, let's say, for example, RSV, terribly popular in kids these days. It turns into pneumonia. And the only way you're treating that is cephalexin.
Mm-hmm.
You got to run a 10-day course of cephalexin. You got to have that stuff on hand. And you're right. If we don't have it, there's a lot of little ones who could pass on. But that's the downside of where we're headed, is that industry won't sustain itself. Our monetary, industry can't sustain itself. We're just headed to the point where we are reaching max capacity in every single aspect.
Yeah, and I did talk to one of the ladies over at Thomas Labs, and it was an internal conflict. I don't know if it was I didn't get any deeper details than that, but they just said that they were doing some reorganizing internally. So if there was some split between family members or a divorce, or I really don't know, but from what they said, it didn't sound like it was something, some external agency that was forcing that upon them. It was just something that had happened inside the company.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that for once our government didn't try to step in and regulate the hell out of something.
Yeah, but, we know that they're big fans of Radio Free Redoubt and Prepper Recon, so they're probably listening right now and saying, maybe we should shut them down.
Well, yeah, it's amazing when you finally get on the radar of the government and you start saying the truth. They just don't like you to speak it, and that's understandably because we're preaching truth, we're doing it in love, and we're just being honest. And you can't beat that. You can't beat honesty. Honesty is always the best policy in every situation. Obviously, it doesn't work for our current president. He's the liar in chief.
And then back to our conversation about silver and gold.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Ben Bernanke told Ron Paul that gold isn't money. Now, even though it isn't money, don't you think it's curious that the Ukrainians sent 33 tons of gold to be kept safe in the U.S. vaults?
Well, crack isn't a drug, right?
Not at all.
Okay, well, as long as we got that straight. No, absolutely. I mean, when the Ukrainians knew that the Russians they've always wanted Ukraine back. I mean, Ukraine is one of the biggest buyers of gas from Gazprom, which just obviously happens to be one of Putin's main stocks in his portfolio. It's got one of the richest farmlands and mineral rights in all of Eurasia. So it doesn't surprise me that Bernanke said, ship that stuff over here. You know what? We'll take good care of it. Yeah, they'll rehypothecate it because there's no gold over there anyways. We got Germany's gold. We've already loaned that out or promised it out to who knows who. Gold is money. I don't care what Bernanke says. I don't care what Yellen says. You walk up to me and you say, I want to buy that, and you have a gold coin in your hand and you've got a stack of $50 bills. I'm going to reach for that gold coin every single time because that's real money.
And then you mentioned Germany's gold, and I think it was 600 and something tons or whatever it was. They were scheduled to repatriate that over a 7-year process. I guess they agreed to that. So it would have came out to, I think, 84 tons that were scheduled to be returned to Germany in 2013, because that was about a year ago that they began the repatriation. Now, they actually only moved 37 tons back to Germany over the entire year. I don't know if it was just sort of a logistics thing, but, they had 365 days to move 30, and they could only manage to move 37 tons. But they were able to get the 33 tons from the Ukraine over and into the U.S. vaults in one night.
Well, you got to look at this. It
must be downhill.
Either that or they're loading it in a wagon and trying to walk it. The craziest thing is, though, it wasn't actually chemically Germany's gold. The Blaze broke the story. Basically, when Germany started getting those bars back, they started testing them. And they went, wait a minute here. This is not the same purity that we shipped you all those years ago. So the gold that was actually coming back was not actually Germany's original gold. It wasn't. The bars may have been stamped close, but the actual purity when that was tested was not the actual gold that Germany had shipped over way back when.
Well, we're going to ask Gomer Pyle what he thinks about that. Gomer, what do you say about that? Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like, we know that the Fed, for years and years and years, has rehypothecated that from one lender to another. They've had to promise this stuff out so many times, and I'm sure at one point or another that gold is actually sitting in China's vaults, if in all likelihood. But that's the thing is, it doesn't surprise me that right now they wanted that gold over here as quick as they could. They're doing everything they can to try to combat with what Russia's about to do to the world. Along those same lines, and we get word today, it's just starting to brew that Russia is going to back the ruble in gold. And that's a big thing. I mean, when we have the Russian bank, Roisa, saying we're going to back the ruble in gold, they're getting ready to make a major, major move in the world. I mean, our president levies sanctions. It really doesn't do anything, so it just pisses Russia off. Russia says, you know what? Okay, fine. We're going to go ahead and up our timetable here. We're going to kick the stool out from underneath you guys, in a couple of years. We'll just do it, maybe in 2 weeks. So what we're seeing is that this information is coming out. I mean, it was reported on NASDAQ's website that this is coming. Russia is trying to pull out of the SWIFT system to create their own internal payment system within the country. They're going to create their own credit card processing system. Because as we saw, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago, they cut off the Visa MasterCard payments, so the Russians couldn't use their cards at all. I mean, they're trying to separate themselves from the dollar as a currency overall, which, this may sound heartless, it's a smart move. It's a really smart move. If they can be the first ones to the prom with a really pretty looking girl, everybody else is going to fall right in line behind them. I'm sure China already has their date lined up.
Now, how's that going to affect the dollar if they back the ruble in gold?
Okay. Well, let's kind of talk through it here for a second. So let's say, for example, we have Saudi Arabia, who buys and sells oil to just about everybody in the world, but they use the dollar, a currency backed by absolutely nothing, just blue sky and farts. But yet we have the ruble, which is actually backed by physical gold located in the vaults in Russia. Why wouldn't a country like Saudi Arabia say, you know what, we want to be paid in gold, real gold, for our oil that we're shipping to you? Obviously Russia has their own oil deposits, but at the same time, why wouldn't they want to be part of a currency that uses something real and tangible? Whereas the American currency, we just print it out of the blue. So of course what it's going to do is when everybody starts shifting either to the yuan or to the ruble, or they start actually doing the transactions in their own currency like the BRIC nations are doing right now, where they're trading in their own currencies or trading in gold for currency, the dollar is going to be completely worthless. It's going to be that car in the lot that everybody walks by and goes, yeah, no thanks, I want nothing to do with that. But it's reliable. No thanks, it's not going to get me to point A with point B without leaking oil and gas. And that's exactly what's going to happen, is the dollar is going to deflate so very rapidly, and then it's going to turn around and inflate stateside so very rapidly, where $1 is going to equal $1 one day, the next day it's 2 for 1, and 3 for 1, and then it's going to double, until next thing you know, we have a situation like they had in the Weimar Republic.
And
we're that close.
There's trillions of dollars, U.S. dollars, all around the world right now, right? And so if it starts to lose value, won't all those dollars come flooding back into the states, trying to buy assets within the states?
Well, yeah. In fact, right now we're seeing China buy up as much as I think they possibly can in terms of property. They're liquidating their cash and they're putting it into real estate here in the States. Now, if you don't read between the lines, that scares the pants off of me. Now, why would China buy up as much real estate as they possibly could in one of the biggest nations on the planet? Well, they're going to need space and places for their people and their gear to go. So why in the world wouldn't you put the cash that's worth absolutely nothing to buy land that you're going to need down the road? So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I think that as we look at the world stage and how these players are all set up on the chessboard, the king and queen, however you want to label them, is Russia and China right now. They're set up for a checkmate of the United States.
And wasn't one of the sanctions that Russia was threatened with was to be kicked out of the SWIFT system?
Absolutely it was. And in fact, they were kicked out of the G8 as well. For readers and listeners who saw that, yeah, they were eliminated from their membership from the G8, which really sent this ball rolling downhill. And once they were eliminated from the G8 and their basically their trade abilities worldwide, they had to figure out some other form of payment system to be able to do business. I mean, they've got alliances already with the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, Australia, Switzerland. I mean, so they've got trade alliances already set in place. And by retaking Ukraine, they're going to have, the ability to transmit more natural gas. They're going to be able to have more farmland to feed their people, not without a little bit of pain and gain. But I think, we've pushed Russia into this place. They've been a bit aggressive by taking the Crimean Peninsula. But, Putin really truly doesn't care what our economy looks like. He could give a flying fart about it. And that's the thing, is that he's had this plan all along. He's watched our president and watched him screw up and knows that he can muscle him. I mean, look what he did to him on Syria. He muscled him on Syria. He outfoxed him. I love using that term.
But the Crimeans, they wanted to be, they were mostly ethnic Russians, and they wanted to be part of Russia. And, don't they have the right to say what type of government they want to have.
Yeah, I guess
I think that's a big problem for the globalists because, if they can defect and say where they want to go, then, maybe Texas can say, that they would like to have their own government and maybe, Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon can separate themselves from the more liberal halves of those states. And, the next thing you know, maybe you've got a coalition between those two halves of those states and Idaho and Wyoming and
I'd love to see the Columbia movement start again up here in Washington State. I think that was one of the most brilliant pieces of legislation of the past 25 years. It just because we have the liberals on the other side of the state. Sorry, Glenn, if you're listening, I know that not all of you guys are liberals over there. But if the Columbia movement was saying, let's split Washington State in half, by golly, do it. You know what? Make Spokane or make Pullman and make the capital of Eastern Washington, because you know what? 70% of our tax revenue goes to the other side of the state to help tunnel under the city by a big thing named Bertha. I mean, come on. I think that absolutely, I think the state of Texas would be the perfect example of a positive succession. They could separate. They've got enough oil that they got to export. Probably every citizen in that state would probably get quite a bit richer. They'd be able to work with Mexico. They'd be able to work with the United States because people would have to pass through Texas to do things. So I think they'd be able to keep their tax revenue. They could be a republic, and I think it would work. I think 100% would work. I think guys like Glenn Beck and those are really smart to be in Texas.
And then you were speaking about the BRICS nations, which for the listeners that may not be familiar with that, it's Brazil and Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, they've already slated to put together their own international trade settlement bank, haven't they?
Yes, and last time I saw anything on that, really, truly, it was a couple of months ago, and they were close. They were shooting, and they were highly talking about using the yuan as the currency for that international settlement bank, because we saw the yuan move up the actual SWIFT system. I think they were number 6 in the world on payments, and then I think they moved to number 3 in the last month or so. But I haven't seen the updated numbers on that. Yeah, they're moving in the right direction on that. If they can do that and people start flooding over to that particular international clearing system, and whoever ends up with either the ruble or the yuan as the master currency on that, either country is going to make a fortune in fees and income.
Or they could even, through the BRICS Trade Settlement Bank, they could even do something that would be similar to SDRs, which the IMF uses, where it's just a basket of currencies, and they could have something they could call it a BRIC, and it could just be a trade currency where it would still allow their central banks to print their way out of debt and do whatever they wanted to do individually, but collectively they could have something similar to the special drawing rights or the IMF and just call it a BRIC, and it would just be for trade among those nations and anybody else that wanted to be in the BRIC system.
Yeah, I could see them doing that, and I could see them not doing that. I think that China has really, truly studied the American Keynesian economics, and let me tell you what, I think they see the flaws in it. I mean, China's feeling some pinch in their own economy, don't get me wrong. I think that they're having some GDP issues over there. They're just ugly, but I think that they're able to effectively separate their incoming of their gold and with a lot what's going on in their country in terms of GDP and production and all those kind of things. Because years ago, I think we accused them of manipulating the yuan on the world stage. But I think for the most part, China is seeing their flaws. They're a smart group of people. They're a smart group of an enemy, because they know exactly what they're going to need to do to make it work. Because if you take America off of the world stage and you get rid of the dollar, they're going to look pretty good to everybody else, And if it's backed by tangible physical gold, and you go back to a Bretton Woods style arrangement, I think a lot of people are going to buy into it very quickly.
And China, they encourage their citizenry to purchase gold.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, China is the number one importer of gold in the world. And I can't remember, I quoted a number on Radio Free Redoubt a couple of weeks ago. Gold Core, they measure the amount of gold kind of flowing out of Switzerland. And the People's Bank of China was the number one purchaser of gold out of Switzerland. And that's just Switzerland. Because we know they're buying it out of, some of the gold trades here in America. We know they're buying up stocks and companies like Pegasus Mines over in Montana. We know that they're physically trying to get as much gold as they possibly can. And yeah, but they're telling their citizens, buy. I mean, they may not be able to breathe over there from all the smog, but by God, they're all going to look really pretty when they all have a lot of gold on their hands.
Yeah. Now, how long do you think we have before we see a major change in our standard of living?
That's the question of the day. I'll position it this way. When Russia backs the ruble with gold, I believe that China is going to go right along with them. China's going to back the yuan and gold. I think you're right about some type of trade-based currency with the BRIC nations. I think we're going to see people flood away. Historically, and everybody's been saying, and I'm going to get a little weird on you just for a second, we got the blood moons coming up. We got some really big world things coming. I think logistically, realistically, in the next 2 months, we could really see some changes from an economic perspective. Now, I may eat my hat on this one or really eat my words, but we can't see everything we're seeing right now and not know that what's about to change on the world stage. I mean, I think if Russia gets their way, they're going to take Ukraine. We know they are. It's just a matter of time on that. And as far as that goes, I mean, yeah, I think what we're looking at is that if the yuan and the ruble get backed in gold, we are going to see a draw away from the dollar for sure, especially in terms of the sale of treasuries. I think China's going to sell their treasuries and get out. They'd be smart not to do it. Russia's already sold quite a few of their treasuries. They haven't documented it, but we pretty much know it was them. They sold a mass amount of treasuries, about 2-3 weeks ago. So yeah, I think we're looking at 2 months. Realistically, we could say some pretty heavy duty changes.
What do you think America looks like after the death of the dollar? Does it look like some third world nation or something far worse? The thing about third world nations is they know how to get by on very little. Americans, we've gotten away from being that resourceful, haven't we?
We have. We don't have the skill sets that we need. That's a really a worry to me when I look around. When I see people come into my bank and I watch these kids walk in, they got baggy pants on and they got an iPhone in their hand and they're walking up to the counter saying, "Hey, I need to get some money on my account." We ask them, "Where's your ID?" "I forgot my wallet." How do you forget your wallet? That's a real basic thing. You get up in the morning, you put your pants on, you put your wallet in your pants. These kids can't even feed themselves because they can't even figure out where their wallet is. We have made our men wimpy. We have over-sexualized our children. We have, our women are cruel to each other and they're mean. They don't embody biblical, values anymore. America looks like this. Picture Kosovo post the bombing and all the horrific things going on. That's how I picture America. Because when nobody can figure out how to do anything, they don't have any skills. There are very few people out there that know how to build anything. That's how I picture America, is that nothing gets repaired. Things break down. There's a fair amount of mechanics and carpenters and those kind of things. But on the whole, if you really truly look at it, we've sent more kids to school for rocket science than we have to be plumbers. So I think what we look at America is it's going to be divided up. I think there's going to be the Texas Redoubt. I think there's going to be the Northwest Redoubt. I think there's going to be the Tennessee Redoubt. I think there's going to be pockets of America that are, and dare I say, revolution, for those who have ever watched the show, that there's going to be the Georgia Federation. There's going to be the Northern, there's going to be all of that, the Plain States, where these nations are going to appear, but there's going to be people who have known how to survive. It's going to be small. There's going to be a mass die-off of people. because things like antibiotics aren't going to be around. There's not going to be things, you can't just go and get a burger at McDonald's anymore. We can't just have Surfer Boy eating lobster and, living on public assistance. There's going to
be. That was a great piece. Fox does once in a while have some good information that they put out, so I will give them credit for Lobster Surfer Boy. That was on food stamps. That was a great piece.
Yeah, Hannity to get a job with him, especially offering him a job. But those are the kind of things we're running into. We have an America that just cannot stand on its own 2 feet anymore. And when that's gone, when the money is gone and the money runs out, and we can look at when the EBT cards were down in Minnesota, and I think actually down in the South too for a short while, the panic that set in on those people's faces. They could not use their EBT card to buy food for their kids.
For an entire hour.
Yeah, an hour. The panic that ensued. I remember watching an interview, and I don't remember what it was. I think it was one of the news outlets up in Minnesota. This African-American gal, the look on her face, she's like, what am I going to do? I don't have anything in the fridge. I don't have anything in the pantry. My EBT card doesn't work. Guess what, America? Your EBT card's not going to work.
Your EBT card is not going to
The
work.
free money is going to be gone. It's just not going to happen anymore. So I think what we're looking at is, I've never been a big fan of The Road or any of those other kind of books that show America as a post-apocalyptic, but I think what we're looking at realistically is an America that crumbles from the inside because its infrastructure won't be repaired. There'll be quite a bit of death and pestilence. At the same time, there'll be a group of people. There'll be a remnant that survives. There'll be those who are faithful to God. There'll be those who are helping their communities. There'll be good organizations like the Oath Keepers that will be intact. There will be people who will rise up to rebuild America into what it should be, a republic based around the principles of the Constitution that worships the one true Lord God Jehovah. And you know what? That's the way it should be. That's the way it absolutely should be.
I remember one of the things that James Ross says in a lot of his interviews is that pray that God will put you in the right place at the right time with the right people.
Oh, absolutely. That's my prayer has always been along. It's interesting when you're a prepper and you're also a believer. You have 2 sources of support. You have God, who's there to back you up and support you, and then you have your group. And I think James has it right, to pray to be in the right place at the right time, but also pray to have the right heart. And that's a big one, to have compassion, because we think about the prepper movement. What's our key defense? We all carry firearms. Yeah, we're going to have them. And that's a hard thing to think about. But at the same time, there'll be that opportunity to give an apple to a little boy who's hungry, who's walking down the road by himself. There'll be that opportunity to help treat somebody's wound, who may have gotten cutting lumber to try to keep their family warm. There'll be that opportunity to give somebody a small bag of rice and say, you know what? Why don't you guys eat tonight? Come back and work for me tomorrow. We'll figure this out. We're going to have the opportunity to be as compassionate as possible, because do we want America back? Absolutely, we want America back. I miss America. I do. This is not the America that I know. But at the same time, I want Christ to be glorified through everything we do over the next 2 to 3 years, or 10 years, or 20 years as we rebuild this. Because at the very end, when we take off our body armor and we drop our AR-15s and we stand before the Lord our God, and He looks at us, and the chills run down your spine, and He looks at you and said, did you help the least of these? Did you help me? That's what we've got to keep at the center of what we do. Even though our mission may be to bring truth, our mission should still be, over the long run, to make sure that Christ is glorified and that people are won. Because if we go kill a bunch of people in a battle for civil war, there's a lot of souls there that might have been lost. But you know what? That day may come. But at the same time, until that day, by golly, look at your communities, folks. Look around you. See what you can do to help wake people up at the same time. teach them God's love. I don't know.
Amen. Very well said.
Just be rambling on there. Sorry.
No, very well said. Very well said. And one of the best things you can do to help others is to be prepared yourself.
Absolutely.
Because, just like on the airplane, they teach you that you have to put the oxygen mask on your own face before you help the child, because otherwise you're going to pass out and you're not going to help anybody. So you got to first get yourself prepared and then start putting away a little extra so you'll have something to share.
Absolutely. Make sure that you've got a year and a half worth of food, if not more, and that you've got, the ability to cook, feed, and, take care of yourself. But yeah, no, it's the truth. If we can't help ourselves, how are we going to help others?
Absolutely.
That's the core of our prepper philosophy, I feel.
If you're part of the problem, there's no way you can be part of the solution.
Absolutely. The world is going to come to your door, and when they come knocking, how will you answer that door?
Yeah. And it was very well said what you said. We always see the borders get redrawn when you see an empire collapse, and that's what we are. We have this military overstretch just like Rome did. And when Rome fell, when they started, and it was a long, slow grind down, and I think that ours might be a little quicker, but when they did start to fall, we saw their borders being redrawn, every couple of years until you eventually saw it split, and then it
gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I think that's going to happen. We're going to see maybe Texas will break away. Maybe the economy will go before that goes, and states will say, "Hey, we're out of here." We're all going to bind together for mutual assistance. Everybody, it'll be like a big schoolyard. Pick 'em. Unfortunately, California is going to be last on the list, but
and New York.
And New York, yeah. Nobody wants California, New York. You guys can pair together.
Yeah.
Figure out how to make it work. But yeah, no, it's the truth. If we can't help ourselves, how are we going to help others? And that's, if we help others with medical needs, or we help others with, who knows? But I think, especially from an economics perspective right now, we have got to be, and I've got an email I'm kicking around to a large group of people right now saying, you've got to speak louder. You've got to let your voice be heard. And you know what? Our politicians just aren't doing it for us anymore. As much as I would love them to, these guys absolutely have no bearing. They don't believe, they're not helping us at all. We have to be helping ourselves. We have to be speaking louder. We have to be meeting in our homes, talking about how we're going to take care of each other, talking about economics. We have to be educated, because that's the only way we're going to make it through this.
Very well said.
So,
and folks can catch you every week over at Radio Free Redoubt, right?
Yeah, every week. Radio Free Redoubt, listening for Eye on the Economy. I've got always trying to bring you guys fresh stories about what's going on in the world.
Well, thanks for all that you do, and thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to be on. Anytime you need me, I will be here to support you, good sir.
Hey, Preppers and Patriots. American Meltdown, the long-awaited sequel to American Exit Strategy, is now available in Kindle and paperback. In American Meltdown, Book 2 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, the new president, Anthony Howe, signs an executive order banning all semi-automatic weapons. Matt, Adam, and Wesley Baer begin training with their local militia for the battle that is coming. Within weeks of the inauguration, the $700 trillion derivatives bubble pops when rates on U.S. debt skyrocket. The derivatives crisis is the final nail in the coffin of the banking system and the death of the fiat currency system in America. With the dollar gone, commerce comes to a screeching halt. While times prove to be tough for all, survival favors the prepared. Get your Kindle or paperback copy of American Meltdown, Book 2 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles on Amazon today.